Hello, and welcome to this EHS Today webinar, Advancing Injury Prevention Through AI and Wearables. It's sponsored by Soter Analytics. I'm Dave Blanchard. I'm the editor-in-chief of EHS Today, and I'll be the moderator for today's webinar. Before we begin, let me briefly explain how you can participate in today's presentation. First, if at any time you're having audio difficulties, or if the slides aren't advancing properly, simply hit your F5 key to refresh your webcast console. If you're running pop-up blocking software, you will need to disable it to view the webinar. Now, if you have any other technical difficulties during today's session, please press the question mark help button that's in the upper right corner, and you'll receive assistance in solving any other issues that come up. This webinar technology will allow you to resize the presentation, and all that you need to do is click the maximize icon. It's in the upper right corner to enlarge the window. We welcome your questions at any time during today's event. So to submit a question, simply type your question into the Ask a Question window on the left side of your screen, and then hit the Submit button. We'll be answering as many questions as possible during the Q&A session that will follow the main presentation. But please feel free to send in your questions at any time, and we'll add them to the queue. Now, please also be aware that today's session is being recorded, and it will be available on the EHS Today website within the next day for you to review. You'll be notified by email just as soon as the archive is available. When today's webinar ends, please take a short moment to complete the very short feedback form that will appear on your screen. And that looks like that's it for my housekeeping tips. So let me now welcome our speaker. We have Heather Chapman as U.S. Account Manager with Soter Analytics and a principal with Paradigm Safety. Heather works with businesses to incorporate safety into their daily operations to ensure employee safety receives the same attention as other high-priority business objectives. If you want to learn a little bit more about Heather, you can just check out the Speaker Details tab on your event console. And with that, I'm going to step aside and turn it over to Heather Chapman. So Heather, the floor is now yours.
Thank you, Dave. Happy to be here. Well, welcome everyone. As Dave mentioned, I do have a tad streak of crazy because I did start my own consulting company. So in 2018, I opened the doors to Paradigm Safety. And in 2020, I joined forces with Soter Analytics and helped them with their product platform and sales across North America. When I started my career, one of the first things I noticed in the organization that I worked with is that they had a major problem with ergonomics. And so all of the activities and events and challenges and the wins that happened over the next 5 years, that's really what spurred my interest and kind of my love of ergonomics and injury prevention. When I started at this organization, their total recordable rate was 26.4. And we all know that's not good. And about 60% of those injuries were due to poor ergonomics. You look at that and you wonder, why are we not fixing this? Why are we continuing to injure people when we know that there's a problem here that could be solved? What I wish is that back then I had access to the technology that we have now, because it could have made the work that we did as a group and as a team at that organization just a lot more effective and a lot faster. What we did was we broke down the injury data and we started looking at where are these injuries happening, why are they happening, what hazards are present. We formed an ergonomics committee. We started doing evaluations. We took measurements. We took videos. We analyzed all that. And we started working with different groups like engineering and production to problem solve. What could we implement here to actually get rid of that risk? And so over the course of 5 years, we worked hard on that. And when I left that organization, the total recordable rate was down to a 6.4. So quite substantial. And most of that was due to the ergonomic improvements that we made at that organization. What we're going to talk about today really is around how can we use technology and the wearables and the video processing as a tool to help us reduce injuries, those injuries due to poor ergonomics. The Bureau of Labor Statistics data from 2020 says that the top 3 injuries make up about 75% of all reported injuries. Those top 3, exposure to harmful substances, and we can attribute that being number 1 due to COVID. Second was overexertion, and third was slips and falls. Under overexertion, that's broken down into 2 different categories. One is repetitive motion, and then one is all those other non-impact injuries, the soft tissue injuries we're looking at. Injuries that result from things like pushing, pulling, twisting, carrying objects, lifting. In fact, the Liberty Mutual Workplace Safety Index ranks overexertion as the number 1 in overall cost of disabling injuries. Awkward postures is ranked at number 5, and repetitive motion is ranked at number 10. So we know it's a problem. The challenge with these injuries is that it's more than just the injury, right? We're experiencing high turnover rates. We're experiencing difficulty in hiring. In some cases, maybe the injuries are, it's the driver causing it to be difficult to keep people and making it difficult to hire people because people don't want to do manual labor that they know is going to end up injuring them. And I think what's more is that these things also impact an organization's overall culture. And I know there's big debate over the word culture, but just to keep it simple today, when I speak of culture, what I mean is it's the way people feel about their employer. It's the way they act when nobody's watching. And it's how important is safety in the day-to-day operations. So turnover, injuries, the priority of production over safety, and in fact, maybe just the perception that production is more important than safety, those things all contribute to a poor culture. Our employees' mental health and their perception of being valued plays a role not only in the culture, but also in their risk of getting injured. I firmly believe that ergonomics is one area in our safety worlds that creates an easy path for employees to voice opinions and to be a part of an organization's process. If they feel that they're heard and they're valued, that's going to have a positive impact on their perception and willingness to actually engage at work. So perhaps we as safety professionals actually have an even greater responsibility, knowing that our role, it can be an easy conduit to helping with employee morale, well-being, as well as those traditional safety strategies that we use. So in the context of MSD injury prevention, how have we tried to engage our employees? Well, it could have been having them partner with us on ergonomic evaluations. Could be interactive training sessions, brainstorming to problem solve, and maybe incentive programs. If you bring me a good idea and we can implement that idea, you get some sort of reward. Those are all ways we've probably tried to engage people in the past. Nothing wrong with that at all. OSHA defines worker participation as involvement in establishing, operating, evaluating, and improving the health and safety program. They say that workers should be encouraged to participate and feel comfortable reporting health and safety issues. They should have the opportunity to participate in all stages of the program design and implementation. That's a lot. So part of what we're going to do today is unpack what that means and figure out how we can engage technology to help us with employee participation. We're going to take a quick survey because I think it might be interesting for all of us to understand what percentage of MSD injuries are you having within your organization. So I'll send this survey to you now. Please respond, and we will send the results to the audience shortly. Hopefully you've all responded. I'm going to go ahead and close the survey, and then we'll share it with the group. You can all see that. We have about 45% of us saying that poor ergonomic related injuries are about less than 30% of overall injuries. 40% of us saying they account for 30 to 50% of overall injuries, and 15 of us saying 50 to 80%. And we have a handful here that say ergo injuries are more than 80% of their total. So pretty significant. And I think it's safe to say all of us, doesn't matter where we work, ergonomics is going to present itself in some way or another, and it's going to be a problem that we'll have to solve. So why are these types of injuries happening? Well, we know that there are physical demands related to any task. Sometimes those physical demands and requirements might be beyond the capacity of the employee. The way the workstation is designed or the way we're asking them to perform their work could also contribute to a greater chance of injury. One of the strategies we've all used to help our employees work safely is training, right? We want to train people how to move safe. We want to train them on ergonomics and proper lifting techniques. I want to talk a little bit about the pros and cons of that. The situation I spoke of earlier, the organization that had that recordable rate of 26.4. One of the first training sessions I had to do with this organization was around incident reporting, and it was to a production department. So here's me, fresh in the field, about 24 years old, and I'm standing in front of a group of tenured production employees, and I'm supposed to be presenting a 30-minute session on incident reporting and investigation. And as I got started, a woman stood up, and this woman, she's 6'2", so when she stands up, she has a presence, and she expressed herself, and she was not in a good place. She, in her very loud voice, asked, "Why are we here? Nothing changes. We get hurt, we report it, and nothing changes. We just keep getting hurt." She went on for a little while, a couple of minutes, in fact, sharing some stories, and she was angry. And at one point, I remember her supervisor started walking forward, and he was going to intervene, and I'm sure ask her to sit down. And I waved him off, and I said, "No, it's fine." And when she was done, I thanked her for her courage to stand up and speak out. And we talked about the past, the present, and what the future might look like. I can't change what happened in the past, but I want to change how we do things in the future. We never finished this session on incident reporting. The learnings that came out of what happened, though, were definitely more valuable than me talking about incident reporting that day. What I want to impress upon us here is that classroom-style training requires people to listen. They need to understand what we're saying and what we're trying to share. They need to retain that information, and then they need to go apply that information. So that can be a long sequence of events that needs to happen successfully in order for someone to apply their learnings in their actual work environment. In the story I just shared, the woman that spoke out was not in a position to learn. And I can assume that once she spoke out, it disrupted the thoughts of the others in the room. So it was safe to say that probably nobody in that room would have gained anything from me talking about incident reporting that day. Instead, we changed course, allowed time for two-way communication, and that started what I'll call the movement, just this culture change and this engagement between employees and management. So with regards to training on the prevention of MSD type injuries, the technology we have today for helping reduce those injuries, it can't solve the problem, okay? You going to use a video app or putting a wearable on somebody's back, that's not going to solve the ergonomic problem. But what it can do is it can help change behaviors. It can make us a lot easier to identify hazards. And it can help us start to understand what do we need to do to eliminate the risk. We as safety people, we still need to take that next step. We need to take that data and we need to use it. And that's the point of the technology now. We want to use the data that's learned from it. It's a big data set. There's lots of information that can be gained from the use of wearables and through video technology. We now need to take that and do something with it. When we speak of wearables, what you're seeing on the screen, that's a wearable device. And this is purely designed to understand somebody's movement. When we speak of ergonomics to our employees, we can demonstrate those good lifting techniques, how to work in those neutral zones, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's translating to the work that they're doing out in the production floor or out in the warehouse. Are they going to recall that ergonomics training when they're in the work environment and productivity is often in the forefront? Are they going to do what they hopefully learned when nobody's watching? We don't know. How people retain information, it's different for all of us. And so how do we make sure that what we're training actually makes an impact? We can look to wearables as one of those approaches. So how does haptic feedback work with this device? We mentioned when somebody wears a wearable, it gives them real-time feedback. Well, it's haptic feedback. So it beeps and it vibrates. And if you had a very simple example, take your phone. If you get a text message and it vibrates, that's your haptic feedback. And your response, I'm going to go check my phone and see who just texted me. Wearables for MSD prevention is quite similar. When a movement that puts the back or shoulders at risk takes place, the device has algorithms built in, it calculates the risk, and then it beeps and vibrates if that was a higher risk movement. That's exactly what we want. You get that real-time feedback. It's literally like having an athletic trainer at your side coaching you into good body mechanics. So as people receive this type of real-time feedback on these riskier movements, they start to change their behavior. And it is common to see users reduce their hazardous or high-risk movements by 30 to 50% over the course of 10 days. Not necessarily 10 consecutive days, just 10 working days. That's substantial. That real-time feedback over the course of multiple days has the ability to really change the way somebody understands ergonomics, how they can apply it to the work that they do. And I would suggest that that type of training and potential is more significant than some of our traditional approaches to safety training. A couple of years ago, there was a haptic feedback study among some nurses, and these nurses participating wore this haptic device for about 4,500 hours. They logged almost 450,000 risky movements, and of those, more than half were considered severe or very high-risk movements. The number of severe movements per hour improved over the duration of wearing the device. So following the study, the nurses were asked if the haptic feedback made them more aware of their movements. 64% said it did. To me, that's significant. When we do standard classroom training or we talk or we demonstrate some sort of safety training, could we really say that 64 of the people would agree that that impacted and made them more aware of their movements and their techniques? I don't know. But in this case, it did. And in fact, the results showed a 74% reduction in risky movements. So even though the participants perceived a degree of improvement, the actual improvement in their behavior was even greater. So that means the haptic feedback improved behavior even if the participants didn't always recognize it. I think that's pretty good for training. So the technology we're speaking of, in terms of wearables, it's this little black device. It provides the real-time feedback in the form of a beep and a vibration. This can get used by multiple people in any 24-hour period, so it's not a one-to-one ratio. It can be scaled very easily. It's shareable. This phone app, video processing, it's app-based technology. very quick to use to do an ergonomic assessment, gives you some real-time risk analysis on the spot, can be used to coach employees. And then there's a dashboard. Generally, this is reserved for management access, but everything that you gain from both the wearables and the video processing populates in your dashboard, and you're able to see all sorts of data. You can manage and monitor people's progress through the program. You can start to compare risk across different workers, different groups or sites, and you can generate reports, and those reports can be shared via email or PDF. But this just very quickly allows you to start understanding where are these hazards present and at what frequency. So the device itself, between the back and shoulder, it can monitor for 10 at-risk movements. And I'll show you those in just a second. It works independently from a phone. So we don't have to connect this device to anybody's phone. In fact, we don't have to connect it to Wi-Fi. So for IT people, that they love that. They don't want us on their intranet. So that's totally fine. We don't need Wi-Fi. The battery life is easily 30 days, but it's known to last 6 to 7 weeks. And it can be worn, the same device, either on the back, on the shoulder. We have smart fix adapters that can be used with hard hats and on headsets. So in many warehouse operations where they use voice pick, we have a feature where the device can actually be attached right to the headset. And we don't use vibration when it's attached to a helmet or a headset. So these are the spine hazards that the device looks for. It's going to look for poor bending. So when somebody, say, bends to the ground and they don't use their knees, they bend at the waist and they pick something up, when they stand all the way back up, the device is going to calculate the angles of movements and essentially, was that a high-risk movement or not? And if it was, it's going to give them a beep and a vibration. Same thing with back twisting. You need a little bit of a forward bend and then twist. And if the device detects that, when you complete the movement, once again, it's going to give you that real-time feedback, beeps and vibrations. And then intense bending. So the device itself, it doesn't know if the box you're picking up is 50 pounds or 5 pounds, but what it can detect is the velocity of the movement. And that's combined with other triggers. So if the movement is jerky and it's not smooth, it's likely going to fall in this category of intense bending. And while workers aren't necessarily notified of static posture and repetition, you see that in your dashboard. Why don't we notify workers of this? Frankly, it would just be annoying. It's too much feedback and we don't want to overwhelm somebody. With the shoulder hazards, same thing over here. We will detect, and you will see in your dashboard, static arm elevation and repetitive movements. We are not providing that feedback to the employees, though. What we will give them feedback for is arm elevation, pushing and pulling, and overexertion. And this is defined as arm elevation of greater than 90 degrees for more than 20% of the time they wore the device. And to monitor for the shoulder movement, essentially, we have a little arm strap that's worn on the bicep, and the device just connects into that. So it's quite easy to use. And again, the same device can get used for either back or shoulder program, but we don't generally recommend those things happen at the same time, simply because it becomes a lot of feedback and is probably overwhelming for the person. But I think over time too, just getting all those beeps and vibrations, it becomes difficult to know, what did I just do? Which device just triggered? So typically it's one program followed by the next. Soter task. So this is the video processing side. This can be used along with the wearables, but it doesn't have to be. Soter task can be used by itself. How might you use this? Well, you can use it for an ergonomic evaluation. It's pure and simple form. I just want to take a video and understand the hazards that are present, the frequency at which they're present, and what is the overall risk of this task. I might use it for coaching. So on the image on the left, you can see the person bending over and her spine is lit up in red. What I would want to do is this, I take a video, it processes immediately. I'm going to turn my phone around and play the video back for her, and she will be able to see when she's performing that task, these are the movements that are putting you at risk of injury. So you can use it for coaching and just to start some conversations about what might we do to change this job. We can use this to compare similar job roles. So with some very large distribution organizations, they have thousands of people performing the same tasks at different locations all over the world. Well, why is it that certain sites within a particular job role are having a higher rate of injury, but yet similar sites with the same job roles aren't experiencing the same high injury rate? Well, we can start taking videos of people at different sites performing the same job task, and we can literally compare side by side to see what's happening between these two. Why is site A experiencing less injuries than site B? Let's take our learnings in the video from site A and start to coach and train site B so that their behaviors might better mimic what's happening at site A. Essentially, you can use it to create the standard of work. You can use this to justify the cost of a control measure. So in this particular example, the image taken here it's actually a process video. And what you're seeing on the left here is a housekeeper at a hotel chain, and she's cleaning showers with a rag. And that forced her to bend and reach quite a bit. We tried video processing with this organization, and it allowed them to see the frequency and the length of time that the back was actually bent in a higher risk position. On our dashboard, we can actually see second by second the angle of movement for the back, the neck, both arms, and both legs. On the right, we see the process video, and it's in green. Well, what happened? So we had this original video, we saw where the risk was taking place, and we had a conversation. What could we do to make some changes here so that we're not asking you to reach overhead and to bend over to clean the tub? We settled on the use of a $100 steam cleaner. Figured even if it didn't work, $100 is not much to lose. So we tried this intervention, and we were actually able to compare side by side what happened in terms of the overall risk. And by using the steam cleaner, we were able to reduce her risk of injury performing this task by about 75%, because now she no longer needs to bend over. We helped her change the way she works so that she's not having to reach overhead because there's now a long wand attached to the steam cleaner. We could show and quantify the risk reduction of this engineering control, of this tool. And that allowed us to go to the finance group and say, look, it would make sense in this hotel that we had at least a couple on each floor so that it was accessible to the cleaners and they don't have to clean by hand anymore. So a great way to, prove to the finance group that when I'm asking for these funds, this is why. I can show you that we're going to reduce risk by this percentage. The other way we could use this is for a job safety analysis. So as we know, we break a job down into its important steps and we identify the risks. Well, one organization I work with is actually embedding these process videos into their JSAs. So now instead of just reading the words, what is this job task requiring me to do? We have a video for each of the steps that shows you how to perform the task correctly and in the most safe way. This is actually being deployed across the US right now with the American Red Cross, and we're doing this as a way to help all of these different individuals as they're setting up patient beds and pulling materials from their warehouse to set up at host sites. They should all have access to a quick video so that they can see, this is how I'm supposed to do this task. This is the way to do it so that when I pick up this bed, I'm not going to injure my back. So it's a real simple and effective way to actually bring a JSA to life. So when I started my organization, Paradigm Safety. It was easy for me to make that leap because I knew I had 2-year-long contracts coming through. And those contracts both required, well, one was solely focused around ergonomic improvements, and one, ergonomic improvements were a part of the overall scope of work. But as I got started, I was using the traditional tools, the RULAs, the REBAs, the NIOSH lifting equation, the caution checklist. I'm taking videos, I'm taking photos. Oftentimes I would have a force gauge with me, my laptop and or my phone, and a tape measure, not tape meese, but I would have a tape measure with me because I need to measure some angles and I need to measure heights. Well, this all takes time. And so I'm traveling to multiple sites across the Midwest, and I'm spending a day at each of these sites to gather all this information and start to pull together what does the ergonomic risk picture look like within this particular job. So for me, the challenge is just being a one-man band. It's the time. It's time to get to the site. It's time to conduct an evaluation. It's time to now, I took the videos and the photos. Now I actually have to go back and review those and second by second, perform some sort of analysis to understand what's the risk. And then I have to prepare a report. It's a lot of time. And then ultimately, I only saw a snapshot in time. I don't know if that person was having a bad day and maybe they were sloppy in their work practices while I happened to be there. Most likely, while I was doing my ergonomic assessment, they probably changed their behaviors. I'm sure that they were lifting much better knowing that I was watching them. So did I really get an accurate picture of overall risk? Perhaps not. What I wanted to try to do is figure out how can I scale this and how can I find some solutions that are going to help me get more work done and require less of my time. So in came, for me at that time, Soter Analytics. And that's when I started using Wearables, and in 2020, the video processing side as well. I think as we try to solve problems, for us as safety professionals, we always try to work towards this substitution or elimination. For us, that's the holy grail. That's where we want to go. We spend a lot of time and attention trying to achieve that level of control, and we should. But I think there's benefit to looking at some of those lower level controls. And in the case of technology, wearable technology in particular, that can have a big impact on that administrative control level. I think in the past, when we think of administrative controls, it's written processes and training sessions. I can't say that has a huge impact on the overall risk reduction. But when you use a wearable device and you can see somebody over the course of 10 days reduce their hazardous movements per hour by 30 to 50%, now that's some pretty significant training that just took place. Coaching people through the use of wearables to move in ways that reduces their chance of injury isn't just helpful to us at work, it helps them at home too. And really that's what we want, right? We want to keep our workforce healthy, not just at work, but at home too. So as they wear the devices and they begin to understand what motions create higher risk, their behaviors will change just from that real-time feedback. They'll start to bend properly. They'll probably start to move items around at their workstation or at their setup so that they can have less beeps. And maybe some conversations start taking place about engineering controls and maybe some design changes that will happen at the grassroots level. That's what we want. We want people to start engaging and generating their own ideas on how we can make change. That makes them part of the process. And we know that if they're part of the process, they're going to buy into this more and they're going to help own the solution. So that's ideal. That's what we want. The elimination and substitution levels, they can be costly, right? Oftentimes we're looking to bring in something that's more than $5,000, $10,000, and sometimes it's in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. Well, that's not going to happen 2 weeks from now. We're going to have to budget. We're going to have to get quotes. We're going to have to put it through the procurement process. There's many steps that have to happen. So not only is it going to cost a lot more, it's going to take time to make that happen. So perhaps the interim control measure is coaching people into better body mechanics. The use of wearables as your kind of your stopgap until you can get to that next level of control. It can simply serve as your interim control measure. And I think even by doing that, you will still have some significant results. As we think about the use of wearables and video processing, I want to share just a few ways that I've used this with several different organizations. So we have 4 case studies that we'll look at. And I just want to give you an idea of how might you deploy this technology? How might you use it? What are some strategies for success? So the first organization we're going to talk about is a global pallet manufacturer. And if you can think about wooden pallets, you know that they get damaged and they have to be repaired. So this organization, they bring in their damaged pallets, and they have technicians that their job is to stand there for 8 hours and repair pallets. Well, they know that elbow injuries and shoulder injuries are one of the big drivers of their workers' compensation costs. And so part of the repair process requires them to use a pry bar. So a board is damaged and it needs to get pried off the pallet in order to be replaced or repaired. So as somebody is maneuvering this 45 to 80 pound pallet, depending on its size, they now have to take a pry bar and pry that damaged board off. Well, this company actually created a really cool tool internally. It was an engineering control that they designed, and what they wanted to do was evaluate the risk reduction. So they had me come in, and we used the video processing application to check their current state. What is the risk, and what does it look like in terms of ergonomics when somebody is repairing pallets in the traditional way, the use of a pry bar? And then a secondary video using their mocked up engineering control, their prototype. And what we were able to see was significant. This tool that they created actually reduced their hazardous arm movements from more than 100 movements per hour to less than 10. That is substantial. And I know that will have a big impact in years to come on the number of elbow injuries that they have. We were lucky enough to also show that it reduced pallet repair time by a little over 30%. So from a process standpoint, it was easy to say, yes, this tool would be a very good investment and something that should be scaled across all of these pallet repair stations. This process involved the employee, so they participated in the process. They had some input into the engineering control. They were asked to demo it and provide feedback on it. All of that was taken into account when we issued a final report to show them the results of their engineering control. So for them, they were able to take that and start scaling this engineering control across their US facilities. This looks outrageous. 86% in injury reduction. Okay, I can say that is not common. We are working with an organization that has been all-star status. They're using the entire technology platform, and they're using it in a way that once they understand a risk, they're taking action quite quickly. This substantial improvement here is limited to one site within this overall facility. This organization is based in Canada. They're rather large. They distribute farm equipment and feed. And so it's actually employee owned. It's a co-op. So the employees here have major buy-in into preventing injuries, because if the company is more profitable, they directly benefit from that. What we were able to do here is launch first the use of wearables. And what happened was, as people were getting these notifications about high risk movements, they started to ask questions. And they would ask questions to their managers and to the safety department. And this group here, as soon as an issue was brought up, they would act on it. So now we have people that are learning how to move better, but also starting to generate ideas. Why do we have to store this bag of feed on the highest rack? Can we not move this to a lower rack? Can we use this type of pallet lift in order to move some things around so that I don't have to do that by hand? Very simple changes that took place here. But what happened is, through the use of coach, people did reduce their average hazards per hour. They were then able to start working together with the safety department and other managers to make changes in the workplace. And what they saw was the video processing side would be beneficial. So now they started using Soter Task to start looking at, if we make this change to the racking system or the way we load a truck, are we going to reduce risk? And so they're using this as a way to confirm that the change they're going to make or want to make is actually going to reduce risk. And in fact, not just reduce risk, but quantify how much risk are we going to eliminate by doing this. They were able to make substantial changes in the way they work and, in fact, reduce their workers' comp claims by over 60% in this past year. It's been significant. And what I really enjoy about working with this organization is it truly is a two-way street here. Employees and management are highly involved. And the culture change that's been evident here, it's really amazing. And I think that part of it has been spurred through the use of wearables and getting people to start giving that feedback, and then the management group taking that feedback and acting on it. This third organization is a major retailer, and they're using the wearable devices in their distribution centers. So especially since COVID, think about all the online shopping that's happening. Everybody buys stuff online now. Well, people at these distribution centers, they're packaging that product for you and they're shipping it out. And then when you get that package and you try that piece of clothing on and it doesn't fit and you send it back, those people take all those returns and process them as well. So it's somewhat of a high stress environment. What they need to accomplish during their work shift is quite significant. They're asked to complete a lot of work, and it's quite manual. They struggle with turnover. They're having a very hard time keeping employees, and it's not uncommon that somebody will start and within the first week they quit. They think that part of that is due to the physical demands placed on them in the work environment. And so they deployed the wearable technology amongst their new hires. So every time a new group comes in their second week of work, they're required to wear the Soter Coach device for 10 days. That actually has helped them reduce their risk of back injury by about 45% amongst new hires, and reduce the risk of shoulder injury by almost 50% amongst those new hires. That's data taken from over 12 months. This year, this retailer is actually rolling out the wearable devices amongst tenured employees. So we're just starting to dabble into, what does it look like to make this a required training for all employees? So we're going to consider the use of a wearable device, their annual ergonomic training. So we're just starting to roll out amongst those tenured employees at this organization in an effort to help them move better, understand their movements better, and then hopefully work with the on-site athletic trainer there to start making some changes. One thing that just happened through the use of first wearables and then Soter Task at this organization was, we noticed in our dashboard there's a particular job role that had a high rate of back bends every shift. Didn't matter who the worker was, if they're in that job role, there's a high rate of back bends. So we went with the athletic trainer and the Soter task app, and we went out there and worked with a couple of the employees and asked, what's going on out here? Why is the rate of back bend so significant here? And what we found was that boxes are stored on the floor. And so when you have to pull from that rack location, you actually have to bend to the floor and pull a box out, and then you have to pull the article of clothing out of that box. So through conversations with the employees and then their supervisor, we were actually able to adjust the rack spacing and get rid of floor storage. And instead, in the middle rack of just having one box, we now have two boxes. We were able to eliminate back bends in that role. So great example of the use of technology to identify that hazards were taking place, then go use the Soter task to assess the risk. And potentially, what would it look like if we changed the rack? If we put the box here, how are we going to reduce risk doing that? And then we use the employees' feedback and comments to make those changes. So just a good example and a success story that it's a great way to use and integrate technology into your processes. And lastly, a supermarket, a large national chain. Their tenured employees, those with over 100 days, reduced their number of hazardous movements by about 39% over 3 months. So if you can imagine, this supermarket has large warehouse storage, freezer storage, but also they set up displays within their actual supermarkets. A lot of different tasks taking place here, plenty of opportunity for ergonomic related injuries. What we saw though over the course of a year was that these employees were able to reduce their hazardous movements per hour. And in fact, it actually increased their pick rate. So it was 5%. That may not seem substantial, but in my mind, 5% is big. That's 5% among anybody within that job category. And over the course of a year, that really adds up. That wasn't our goal in deploying Soter Coach to this workforce, but that was a nice side benefit that we got. And that helps prove to the finance group, this is a valuable program. Not only helps you reduce injuries and costs spent on injuries, but in fact, this is helping you with your productivity too. So what can you gain? You can see on the slide some of the gains that you can have under injury savings and employee engagement and productivity. But I think what I want to summarize here is just saying some of these outcomes can be easily quantified. It's very easy to see when we've reduced injuries and how much we've saved in workers' compensation costs. It's more challenging to quantify the impact on morale and culture, but in my experience, it's been positive. We can see that through the use of technology, we can definitely drive down the number of injuries. We can drive down the dollars spent on workers' compensation. If we engage at the site level, it's a great conduit for getting employees to participate in our health and safety program. And hopefully by doing so, we drive up engagement, we increase their morale. And if we're really lucky, we can actually increase some of the efficiency within a particular job role or a task or at the site level. That helps us kind of get where we need to go. Because if we can show all of these things, injury savings and engagement and productivity gains, that helps us prove to stakeholders that the use of this technology can help us in many different ways, not just in terms of ergonomics, it can actually help us save money. And so through the use of technology, if you can get your other stakeholders engaged and involved, being able to demonstrate how this has helped in the realm of savings and engagement and productivity gains will be critical. So to wrap up, I think technology can get used to help all levels of that hierarchy of control. The wearable piece definitely helps at that admin control level, but the use of the data from both the video processing and the wearables can definitely get used to help us get to those higher level controls. This type of technology is getting used in all industries. Your management group can access a very easy to use cloud-based dashboard. Where would you use this and how might you use this? Well, it can get used for new hires. It can get used for simply risk identification. It can get embedded into JSAs, perhaps use it at Kaizen events. It can be used to modify behaviors for job descriptions. So maybe you want to take that physical data that you get from the devices and embed it into your job descriptions. Could get used for return to work. So somebody is injured when they come back to work. Part of their rehab is that they wear one of these devices. It helps them make sure they don't re-injure or aggravate the existing injury. Can get used for early intervention. So if you have a process whereby people report pain before they need to go to a clinic, deploy a device. Hey, my shoulder's really bothering me. Okay, I'm going to ask you to wear this device for 10 days. Let's see what happens. I want to help you change some behaviors. Talk them through the process of using the device and how it's going to be valuable to them, but then engage with them too. And perhaps you can make some changes before they need to go see a physician. And then, of course, it can be used purely for training. Whether it's new hires or tenured people, it can be considered your ergonomics training. And then the use of this type of technology really helps you scale your work. So rather than you or your team members going out and having to do assessments, let the devices gather that data for you. Then take that video processing technology out to the field or have supervisors in the field take that video for you. And as soon as it syncs with your dashboard, which is almost immediately, you can see in real time what's going on. So Dave, I will wrap up and turn this back to you and open up for questions.
All right. Thank you, Heather. That was fantastic as well as fascinating presentation, and it definitely has sparked a number of really good questions. If anybody else out there has been sitting back waiting to ask a question, go ahead and type it in, and we'll get to as many as we can in the time remaining. Any question that we don't answer during this live webinar, we'll forward it on to Heather, and maybe she'll follow up with you.
Sure.
Afterwards. So in a quick reminder, everybody, at the very conclusion of this webinar, there will be a feedback form. Just take a couple seconds, but we'd appreciate if you filled that out. All right, Heather, I'm going to start with this one. Actually, it's a couple of good questions that the person asked, so I'll kind of do it in two parts. First part, person says, so in taking it's kind of funny. He says, in taking bites out of this elephant, where do you start? Do you start at the section level or at the department level? What is a productive amount?
Okay. This is highly variable. It can change given the organization we're working with. I am a big believer in quality over quantity. So my usual suggestion is, if you know that there's a certain area that's causing most of your injuries or your recordable injuries, we can start there. If you don't know, or you're not sure, or maybe you have several groups that are generating most of the injuries, then I say we'll start with the group that seems most receptive to this type of technology, and start smaller. So rather than saying we're going to scale across your entire organization right away, it's better to start smaller and understand, how is this going to be accepted by our employees? What hurdles might we face while we're trying to launch? Because trust me, every single time you launch this technology, we all learn something new. That kind of gives you a template for scaling out. Maybe you want to start with your new hires. Maybe in looking at your injury information, you see that most of your injuries are coming from those with less than 30 days. That could be a starting point. You embed it into your onboarding process.
Okay, and a follow-up question to that first part. The person is asking about getting or presenting ROI when an executive says, well, what's the ROI of this project? How do you get a buy-in for something like this other than just saying there's going to be a reduction of injuries? Does it take more than that to get the buy-in?
Yeah, sometimes it does. And usually what I'll do is ask for injury history information. I don't need names or anything, but if an organization can share at least the last 3 years of injury data, the types and the counts, and ideally the dollars spent on that, that helps us design the strategy that we think will work best for the launch and deployment of this type of technology. It also gives us the information we need to give that organization a very specific ROI. What might this look like 6 months from now and 12 months from now? And that's generally how I try to position a proposal to an organization. Is it's based on their own injury data and their workers' compensation costs. And from that, I will help them work through what number of devices would work best. Where might you want to use Soter Task, and who are we going to train in order to use that video processing? And then determine your ROI. So in order to do that, yeah, injury information is very helpful. The productivity gains typically happen later. And in order to do that well, we really need to integrate our technology with whatever systems being used to track productivity within an organization.
Okay, thank you. Take a couple other questions. This one asks, how effective is the solution in assessing work performed in elevated locations from an aerial lift? Well, the wearable device is really about postural analysis. So whether they're in the air, on a lift, or on the ground, the device is going to track their back bends, their back twists, the intensity of a movement, overhead reaching. It doesn't necessarily care if the person's elevated or not. It's still looking for those postural angles of movement and determining if that was a high-risk movement or not. If the person is asking about, does this assess fall risk? No. This device doesn't have anything to do with the potential for a fall or detecting if a fall is taking place. Okay. Another question. Do the wearables trigger reach distance as a risk? So for the shoulder program, it will detect open arm, push and pull. The wearable itself won't understand, say, the length or breadth of the reach, but it does understand if the arm is open and we're applying force, push or pull. What I would say about detecting reach and better understanding is if you're using wearables and you see in the dashboard that there's a high level of open arm reaching or push pull in your dashboard, that's where I would go then use the Soter task video to better understand the significance of the risk to that open arm reach. Okay. Boy, a lot of good questions. I want to get to as many as we can. What time frame do you recommend workers wear wearables to help remind them of proper behaviors and body mechanics? Forever or over a certain period of time?
Well, just as an example, let's say an employee comes in at the beginning of their work shift, they take a device, they wear it for their whole shift. At the end of shift, they return that device. If you're running multiple shifts, that same device can get used by another worker on second shift and again on the third shift. How long should they use it? Well, generally, the recommended time frame is 10 days. And why 10? What I see from data over the last 5-6 years from all sorts of companies is the biggest amount of risk reduction, that reduction in hazardous movements per hour, takes place in days 3 through 6. I kind of consider days 7 through 10 as the reinforcement phase. So they've learned and now they've understood and they've started to make behavior change. Those last few days are really designed to help reinforce those behaviors so that they sustain. We do have and work with some organizations that require the use for 30 days. We do have a couple that have made it part of their PPE. So in the warehouse setting, when somebody puts on their safety vest, the device is attached and they wear it every single day. I think partly it's going to depend on organization culture and what you're trying to achieve through the use of the technology. Me personally, I don't think I would want to wear a device every single day indefinitely. 2 reasons. One, as we know, when there becomes lots of feedback, think about all the signs that we see on walls. After a while, it just becomes background noise. We probably don't even really notice. So I would be a little concerned that indefinite use would lead to people just tuning it out and not really learning from it. Secondly, I have a concern that it might impact kind of the culture between management and employees. If an employee continues to wear the device and they keep getting the same beeps every single day and nobody's done anything to make a change, my guess is they're probably going to walk away feeling defeated and that the organization doesn't care for them. So unless we're taking active steps to make change while we're getting that data from the wearables, I don't think I would suggest that it's worn for more than a month at most. And that to say, maybe you rotate it through the workforce and somebody wears it for 10 days and maybe 6 months from now, you go back to that first group and you have them wear it again for 3 to 5 days, just to spot check, just to make sure that, yeah, you learned, you changed, and it's sustained.
All really good suggestions, Heather. So thanks for that. And I'm looking at the clock. So we have reached and exceeded the top of the hour. Still a lot more good questions. So everybody who's had a question that wasn't answered here, we're going to send them to Heather and the team at Soter, and they'll be able to follow up.
Very good.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's some really good questions in there too. I'd like to thank Heather Chapman for her presentation today. As well, I'd like to thank our sponsor, Soter Analytics, for making it all possible. So on behalf of EHS Today, I'm Dave Blanchard. Stay safe and stay healthy, and take care.
Thank you.